Welcome back, AP. We left off in class today talking about Peter the Great, right? So Peter the Great is going to be probably the greatest Romanov. He ruled from 1682 to 1725, and like I said, he was like a man among men. But the big question that was lingering on everybody's minds during this time period was Russia. I'm still not convinced they're Western yet. Are they still Eastern? Are they still Western? What are they really? Not after Peter the Great, though. After Peter the Great's reign, it was confirmed that Russia was a Western civilization in grand Western European style, right? Now, the big thing about it is he created the Western version of Russia that you know of today, right? When you think of Russia being like a part of the European Union, yes or no, if you, like, well, they're not a part of the European Union, but you understand what I'm saying. When you think about their interactions with the European Union, their interactions with the United States, their interactions with all of Western Europe as a whole, and when you see Russia as a country on a European map, bang, that's all thanks to Peter the Great, right? Because in all actuality, Asia should start at Russia. But, and then again, Asia should also still be Europe. Now, 1 year out of his reign was considered peaceful. A big part of his growth has to do with the fact that he also grew the army, okay? And he also is going to try and grow Russia. Remember I told you about how, like, Russia started out as just Moscow, and then it grew to encompass more area, and then it grew to encompass more area, and then bang, bang, and it just kept expanding outward. Well, a lot of that has to do with his ability to grow the military. So, also a lot of it has to do with his ability to westernize / modernize, so put modernization somewhere in here, Russia itself. He took 200 nobles on a grand tour of Europe, right? He took 200 nobles on an 18-month tour of Western Europe where he studied crafts, weaponry, naval fleets, the practices of taxation, ruling classes in these different countries, etc., etc., etc. The most amazing thing about this grand tour is little things that he did, like how, for example, he actually put a hammer in his hands and learned how to craft metal while he was in Spain. He stayed in very meager, very modest abodes, like actually stayed in like a very regular style home that many of the people that would actually be living in at the time. He didn't overexpose himself. He wanted to learn as much as he could from all of the other Western countries in Europe. He also, like I said, was 6'7", was a giant among men, and also was absolutely blown away by the power that trade brought to England and the Dutch in their East India companies, right? So the big thing that was on Peter's mind was grow our trade and expand monetarily, grow our military and expand territorially, grow our modernization and expand economically, right? Here's another cool thing about Peter the Great. Just his picture alone makes him stand out as a non-Eastern or non-traditional version of a Russian. Remember today in class, there's a reason why we're looking at this. Today in class, we looked at the picture of Ivan the Terrible and kind of his look as a stereotypical Russian. Well, a lot of that actually is being directly debated by Peter the Great right here. One of the big things is, of course, he's not dressed like he's about to go through the Arctic tundra. He doesn't have a beard. He has nicely done hair. He is wearing very eccentric, very embellished Western-style clothing. All of this comes from his grand tour. Also, one of the biggest things that was his war of aggression against Spain. So the war of aggression against Spain is sometimes called the Great Northern War. It doesn't really, it was just started in direct opposition to Sweden. And all of it really is, it's a power grab trying to gain access to the Baltic Sea. So Peter learned so much from a war that he actually lost. So early on in Peter's reforms, following his grand tour of Europe, he tried to lash out against the Swedish and take control of the Baltic Sea, which is in northern Russia, right next to Sweden, because he needed a trade port. Because as you know, Russia is a very landlocked, very, very cold country. It's not very easy for you to actually gain trade routes in Russia. Russia is going to fail in this war and get beaten by an 18-year-old king, which was a huge slap in the face. But Peter realized that he needed to restructure, to become more Western, to become more organized, to become more intelligent, right? So he could go back and beat out the Swedish and take the Baltic Sea for his own. So He is going to reform a lot of different things in the Russian style things. Nobles are going to be now civil servants, much like a legislative branch of sorts. He's going to require them to go to 5 years of school away from home. It's in a university style setting, which many of them are going to rebel against, but they're still going to do it regardless. He's going to create a common man army of 200,000 men, biggest in Europe. And also, he's going to elect the nobles as military officers, much like Frederick Wilhelm did with the Junkers in Germany. Also, serfs and peasants were going to be required to work in factories and on farms to support the military directly. So his big thing was grow the nobility, grow the ruling class, grow the military, grow in intelligence. And in the factories that he actually was using the factories to create modern weapons, modern cannons, modern ships for naval battles, modern everything, the most modern versions of everything he could get his hands on. Because historically, Russia was an area that fought using farm tools and swords still and very Eastern-style warfare methods. Now, as time went on, he is going to come back and he is going to crush the Swedish to gain access to the Baltic Sea. In doing so, he is going to build the new capital of Russia. He is going to move the capital from Moscow to St. Petersburg after this monumentous victory. And he is going to totally, write somewhere down, totally reform Russian society. He's going to reform Russian society, and many Russians are going to hate all the changes he brings. For example, some of this includes, so let's look up St. Petersburg, Russia. So some of the cool things about it, for example, include the Winter Palace that he had built out in St. Petersburg in the Baroque style, the same style that the Palace of Versailles was actually built in, right? Like, look at that bad boy. It's gorgeous. He's going to have several St. Basil-style cathedrals built in St. Petersburg as well. That is the view from St. Petersburg, a modern Western city, a gorgeous area propped up on all of the great trade influences coming in and out of the Baltic Sea. Look how beautiful that is. Now, this is really cool, too. Along this street, along the Bank Bridge, this is where nobles were forced to build elaborate stone houses to try and show that they were committing to the new capital and the new way of living life in Russia. A lot of other things are going to come down as well, where he's going to say, you're not allowed to, shave your beards, right? He wanted people to look more French and more, what's the word I'm looking for? More reformed, more refined. He actually wanted everyone to look as Western as possible. Wow, really? This happens to y'all all the time, and I really still don't understand why. Anyway, getting back to what I was saying. He wanted everyone to look more Western. So he said, you are not allowed to, if you're in my royal court and you are one of my nobility that aids me in government practices, you are not allowed to have a beard. And he's going to get a lot of kickback from the Russian Orthodox Church from this because actually they believe in growing your beard long as a show of piety. Also, he's going to make it so women and men are allowed to choose their husbands and wives and goes away from that arranged marriage thing we were talking about with Ivan IV. He's going to create a book of Russian manners that are modeled off the French. He's going to force all of his nobility to learn French and speak French to him because that was the diplomatic language at the time. And then also, not to mention the fact, too, he is going to create a lot of different practices bringing equal rights to women, that they didn't have to wear veils when they went outside anymore, that they could actually just walk outside very, very normally. A lot of Russians are going to buck back against this, but Westernization meant more power. So Peter the Great is the guy that brought Russia to the dominance and to the era and brought them into the right playing field against the rest of Europe. And that's where we're going to stop for this evening. Just kind of finishing up Russian stuff. I know on the board it said the Ottoman Empire as well. They're not really European, so we're going to literally talk about them like that. I'm talking like one slide tomorrow about the Ottomans and just be like, they were there, they were really big, they caused some problems, etc., etc. But that's going to be where we're going to stop for today, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.